as you can see, the bonnet, or the hood, is now on the car and it's looking mighty fine. So yesterday I managed to bolt up the hinges, which required a bit of help from my brother and my housemate to hold the bonnet in place just while I centered up these bolts and tightened them down. And then it was just a matter of lowering the hood, adjusting it a little bit, lifting it back up and tightening them. It was a bit of a pain in the butt, it took about half hour, but I managed to get it there. The body panels on the car are not perfect. The guards on the left and right, I think I might need to drill out the holes on the guards just so I can squeeze this guard a little bit in more and that guard a little bit in more. The gap I'll show you in a second when I put it down, but the gap is just, to my liking, a little bit too big. The top gap is fine. These little rubber mounts hold it where they need to go. The only issue I have is the spring that I'm using here for this release latch. So when the bonnet is closed, that sits down, and then when the lock is released, this spring is supposed to pull that back and pop the hood up. This spring is too weak and it's not actually putting enough pressure this way to pop that latch up. So I'm gonna have to change the spring. It's not a big problem, it's just annoying that I have to put my hand under there to lift up the hood when I pull the hood release. I haven't sprayed the top yet. I wanted to do it while it was on the car so I could measure up the GT stripes and get them straight. That's why the hood is on there. I gave the bonnet a sand down though, so that's ready for whatever I want to do. I also attached the hood stay. Windscreen wiper blades are now fitted. Windscreen wipers are now attached and they work splendorifically, which is great. Mirrors we sorted out before. We got the trim on, it's looking good. I've ordered myself some of the locking strip that goes inside this black rubber. Hopefully that gets here in a few days time, maybe a week, we'll see. But this stuff's hard to get. I can't find anywhere that does the original Ra28 locking strip. So I've ordered the VB or VH Holden Commodore front window locking strip. I bought a locking strip from a Toyota Corolla, and it wasn't wide enough to actually sit in these little holding lips, and it wasn't wide enough to push that where it needs to go to. So that was a bit of a waste. It was only 20 bucks, but you know, whatever. It would just sit inside there with no pressure being pushed against it. The whole idea of a locking strip is to force this rubber against the frame and against the glass to stop the window from popping out. So the kit that I've purchased was like $38 or $39. It was what do they call it? The Mylar, I think it's called, like a Mylar strip, and they said it will form around the edges, no problem, the corners. If the corners aren't too sharp, then that's not bad. But it also came with the two 90-degree angles for the bottom for a Holden Commodore. I don't think it's going to be as good as it sounds, just because I think I'm going to have to edit the corners, which is not a biggie. But if I can make it work, I'll share it with you all. Where did I get it from? Rare Spares in Arundel on the Gold Coast. She helped me out. She helped me try and find the right size. With this, you need something that's got a strip width of around 14 or 15 mil, so that it actually forces that down, where the original one I bought only had 11 mil and it wasn't going to work. So I'll explain all that when I get to it. I've just slowly gone through and kind of been cleaning up the paintwork on the car before it gets its final kind of buff and touch up. I don't know if you can tell here, but this is nice and clean. That there is nice and dirty. It also sounds horrible. This is probably 2.5 years of sitting in the garage with just muck and grot that's built up all over it, and I'm just slowly going through and wiping it off. I'm just using a little bit of methylated spirits on a rag and getting rid of all the grime so that it's ready for its buff. So that's kind of how it sits at the moment. Oh yeah, side markers I put in place. It was late at night, I didn't video it, but pretty much I just cut a little opening in the sheet metal using a Dremel, so it would fit these into place, and then bolted them in. That was a very, very easy install. I'm not sure what else I've done that I've kind of missed out on showing you. I don't think it's much at all. I'm trying to organise a rear latch or a rear catch, which are impossible to find, but it's like the last major piece of the puzzle before I can actually take it for a drive. Interior's working good. Oh yeah, that's right. I was having issues with the down there, my relay box, which is awesome. I bought another one here that's going to go on the other side for the other relays, but the relay for the fans, the auto fans, I was having issues with it and the relay wasn't turning on, so I installed an individual switch, an override switch, onto the dash of the car, so that if the fans don't want to turn on, I can do it myself. That's a good safety precaution. I can turn it on whenever I want. I've set it up so that even when the car turns off, this is not running 12 volt power from the fan and from the battery. This is a signal wire. So I'm not actually running pure power up into the dash using this switch, which in some cases, that's the way people do their manual fan switches. I don't need that kind of power coming through the dash, touching all the rest of my wires, getting hot. So this is literally just a signal wire that signals the relay to switch on and off. So it's a very safe way of doing it. Pretty much all it's doing is it's an earth out switch. So when it's on, that's actually earth against the chassis of the car. It's a very, very simple switch to do. A couple of videos on YouTube on how to do that. I have gone to the effort of installing the, I guess, the water flow control valve for the heater. So that's now in place and it works, and when the hot water comes through here, hot air comes out there through the bottom, so that's really, really good. I now have a heater, and all the controls work. So lots of little things left to do. I got to tidy up the edges of my trimming here. I got to go get some staples and restaple it all. I only use glue around the edges, and it's failing me, so this is why I'm not an auto trimmer. My brother is going to bring some staples and a gun back from work so that I can rip all these panels off and restaple the edges. The one thing I'm more excited about is I got my wheel. Now remember I was talking about getting one that wasn't too fancy pants, but also had a nice kind of center in the middle that made it look a little bit more stock. So this is the normal wheel you see getting around. That's what you buy, and it looks a bit boy racer with that steel in the middle that you can see. Not a big fan. Where this one comes with the center plate, which is awesome. It makes it look a lot neater. I'll put a link in the description of where I bought this. It's just an eBay job. It was really cheap. I think maybe 80 or 90 bucks. I really can't remember, but I think that looks sick. So what I'm going to get around to doing now is just putting it on the car, which sucks because I'm going to have to realign my boss kit, because my boss kit in the car was for an old wheel that was actually rotated and all these bolts don't fit. So let's put it in and see what it looks like. So as you can see, my issue at the moment is these 6 bolts are, you see that's horizontal there, where I need a bolt to be right in the middle for this wheel. So right now, they do not line up. So I have to actually attach this wheel at an angle like that use it to pull the boss kit off, align it where it needs to be, and then tighten up that bolt again. So let's get to pulling this apart. The other thing with this wheel too, this is a 365mm diameter wheel. Nearly all the steering wheels, the aftermarket wheels you buy on the internet and through places, they're 350mm, and I think that's just way too tiny for a car that doesn't have power steering. I could buy wheels that were much bigger than this again, like the real classic looking like 380mm stuff and huge wheels, but I didn't want to feel like a bus. So 365mm is still a really, really nice size wheel. But it just is going to give me that little bit more control over, steering a car that, like I said, doesn't have power steering. Little tiny wheels on cars with no power steering is a little bit ridiculous. So this made sense to me. Another thing I'm just realizing now is the Allen keys that I'm using to hold this into place. They are beveled to accommodate the old steering wheel. These are not, and I hope that they don't interfere with the cap that goes over the top. I might test that out now, because if they do interfere, I've got a bevel, and I'll actually bevel out these pieces to make the bolts fit. As soon as this is just in place, let's have a look. No, they won't interfere. You see, this has got like a cutout in the middle of it, so that'll go over easily enough. Alright, so now that the wheel's in place, leave the nut on the center, so when you pull this forward with a lot of force, you won't smack yourself in the teeth. You're gonna have to remove that nut completely to change the position of this. So the wheels at the front are now dead straight. That's just a matter of lining that up so that they're relatively straight, which that's it. Put this bolt back on, and then give it a tighten. Alright, so before I go put the center cap on, the original wheel had one wire for the horn, and it would earth out on the inside of this wheel. Because we're using a lifted panel and the horn button is not going to be touching the steel, it's got 2 points. So what I need to do is make a quick wire that goes from one of these through this little hole, and then I'm going to have to earth it somewhere into the chassis of the vehicle just so that my horn will work. The other original wire will just connect to one of these. I don't think it needs to be any particular way. Again, we're just earthing out a connection here. Pressing a button and away she goes. So I'll get on to doing that real quick. Right, so my idea of running an earth wire through the wheel onto the chassis, I wasn't thinking straight. I got to turn the wheel. When I turn the wheel, it's going to rip the wire around the steering column. So the only place I'm going to have to actually bolt the negative wire is probably on one of these bolts. Now I can do that easily enough because there's a cap that goes over it. I'm not going to see it. So that there is going to go about there, and then hopefully our horn works. So I'll get on to installing that. Alright, and just like magic, earth wire is there. The wire was a bit longer than I needed, but I just didn't want to cut it off and lose an end, so that can just live in there. That's where it's going to stay. So let's connect these together, turn the battery on, and make sure I got a horn before I reinstall this centerpiece. Alright, testing complete. The 2 wires are attached. If I can show you this without disconnecting them. There's my 2 wires. So let's... Yes, we have a horn. So I'm just going to disconnect the battery again. Pop this in place. Now this only pops onto the center as well. It pops on with a bit of force, but not enough for it to fly off or anything, so this is ready to just get kind of pressed in place. And there we have it. That wheel looks really nice in here. Yeah, that looks killer. I'm so happy I got one with like a centerpiece in it. Like I said, I didn't want it to look too boy racy with the steel, although those wheels can look good in a lot of cars. I was thinking about going the wood outside with the chrome inside, which I had on the last celica, but the last celica was a lot more original than this one. You know, the dash was all stock and it had the wood trim around the dash, and it kind of made sense. This one is all black and vinyl-y and suede-y and everything, so I've kept the black theme on this. And yes, although it does have red stitching, I would have liked that to be black, but that's the only real option this wheel came with. I could dye that black if I really wanted to though. Well, that's a success. I like it. I think it looks absolutely awesome. Horn still works, which is really good. Let's put the bonnet down. I'll just do this at the same time. Alright, so hood comes down. These hinges, by the way, I've said it a million times, they are freaking awesome. Now when I pop this down, I'm not going to be able to pop it easily enough, but I'll do it anyway. Oh. Okay, that's in. So it goes in real easy because the spring that I've got is not strong enough again. So, like I said before, the body lines and stuff, they're pretty close to, you know, the rest of the car. Let me just close this door. So the gaps are, you know, they're not going to be super close on these old cars, but I think this one, this body panel, I need to adjust the holes where the bolts go, so I can just move this over a little bit, and literally probably only 2 or 3 mil, just to make that look really, really neat. Again, this is on the car because I need to respray the bonnet for the 3rd time, which is a pain in the sphincter. This side here, I'll probably move a little bit as well. Up the top, the gap is fine, but down the bottom, it's just a little bit off, and I think I just need to undo the bolts and push it over a bit. That should take care of all those little tiny gap issues. But regardless, I think it's actually pretty cool. And the gap at the top is a little bit more than what I want, but that would require me moving the whole bonnet forward, which would kind of throw off the lines of the guards and stuff. So I'm actually happy dealing with a bit of a gap up here. You know, I'm not too fussed with that. It's nice and dark and black in there anyway with the paint, you can see, so it's not going to look too crappy. So that has to get painted. I'm going to do that a different day. I'm not going to do it now. And that's it, kind of all together. Also, I had a quick question from Zaylon, I think you pronounce his name. Sorry if I got it wrong. He was asking about where is part 2 for the central locking install that I put on this car. And I realized that I never actually got around to doing the part 2. I kind of wired it all up and that was it. I left it as is. I never documented it. So what I'll do is I'll quickly just run through just the final steps. So where I left the video last time, which was quite a while ago, was the manual mechanical adaptation of the motors for the central locking kit into the car. So behind these panels, the central locking has been installed and it all kind of works great, all mechanically. So what was left was just wiring of the actual box that you get with the kit. And that kit is going to be listed on that video if you search. And basically what it is a, let me turn the light on here, give me a sec. Okay, so basically what you get with the kit, back here I have placed it, that little box right there, and the little tiny plug that comes with it, that little plug, is what comes with the kit. There's a black earth wire which you need to earth, which I've done just there. You can see that screw into the side of the car. And then it's all just color coded for you to plug your wires in. You need direct power going from the battery to that control box 24/7, because obviously you need to unlock your car to get into it before you can put the key in the ignition. And that's with, I believe, the red coloured wire which is there, and that just runs up and is wired into my main power feed. The rest of the wires that run through the door, through that little tiny cable, just plug in down here at the bottom. Same with that side. And then I've just run the big long black lead all the way through the firewall, or against the firewall, underneath that carpet. This is the actual lead of the left door into that box. And that's all you need to do. You need to earth it, you need to allow power to get to it, and then you just need to connect the insides of the door motors to it. So pretty much, once it is all together, you then have your central locking button remote-y thing. You press it, you lock it, and it's now locked. You press it to unlock it, and it's now unlocked. So, that's how that works. So part 2, that was it, briefly, but it's very, very simple. I didn't really feel like redocumenting it just because I already had shown the hard part of the install, which was putting and adapting the motors into the door panels. From there, it's very easy. It's just plugging the wires where they need to go. 12 volt power to main battery source, and earth that cable, and then just plug the rest in. And that's it. Obviously the Solex locks work as well, which is great. So I'm going to put that back in the ignition. I was going to do something else. Can't remember what it was. That's what I was going to do next. Was respray the bonnet. And I just did it. I didn't want to record this bit because I've already done a whole video on the process of respraying this bonnet. It just sucks that I had to do it for a third time. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it. As far as the spray is concerned and the GT stripes, they've come up really good. There's no bleed between the masking tape. The whites come up real sweet. I got the proper black acrylic now, so that's working. But what I'm not too sure on, and I'm going to give it a test, but I've put the name of the car in a stencil up on the GT stripe. I don't know if it's a bit dicky or not, but we'll see how it looks. So she is now named, and I'm about to peel that off and see what it looks like. So if it looks like turd, I'll just have to kind of remask that little area and black it out again. But let's see. Alright, by no means is it perfect, but it doesn't look too bad. At least the name is now on it. Keep tripping over that. So, that is the freshly sprayed bonnet with the name on it, which is great. The paint's come up pretty good. Obviously it still needs a cut and buff because I'm using acrylic. It doesn't kind of set the same way that 2-pack does. So this will need to be cut back and polished and buffed. But the clear coat has also got green and purple pearl in it. So on the black parts, at least, it's going to come up kind of like a slightly different color depending on what direction you're looking at it. And that's the same with the top GT stripes as well. It's just because there's so much dust and crud on them, you can't really tell. But you can kind of tell. You can see green here in this light, a bit of purple in the other light, and depending on the angle, it'll change. So that's pretty cool. It is actually over the whole car, that purple and green pearl, but because it's a white base, it's so hard to tell that there's pearl on it. So it's really just kind of a blinding white, which I'm okay with. But yeah, the bonnet's finally done. Like I said, it's not perfect. There's a couple little bits and dust that have fallen into it, but I'm not overly fussed. This is just a garage spray job. Compared to what this car was like when I picked it up, this has come a million miles, so I'm happy with the paint job that's on it now. Plus it's going to be a daily driver. I'm going to scratch it up anyway. So any hooties, Evelyn is now legitimately named. I'm going to call it Eve, but Evelyn's its full name. From the movie WALL-E, of course. Little evil white robot. Not really evil, but still cool and all. But anyways, we're making progress. So I just gave Eve a quick polish up and just a kind of a rough buff around everything that had been missed. The bonnet's come up okay. Obviously there's a couple of ripples still in it because it's a very old bonnet and I'm not a professional panel beater. You can kind of see in the reflection there just a few little dents and stuff and ripples through the bonnet. But for the most part, it's come up really sweet. The reflection's really nice, the white's popping, that pearl colour, there you go. So that's the green. That's the green in direct light, and then when it's like a reflective light, it's purple, so that's pretty cool. Buffed up the sides of the whole car. Hopefully, yeah, you can kind of see the green pearl in there, but because it's against white, it makes it real difficult to spot. The top is the same. So she's had a bit of a buff. The paint's still holding up pretty well. There's a couple of areas that are I'm a bit annoyed at, just like I said, a couple of chips where my motorbike rearview mirror has tapped the paint. I still have to kind of buff off this excess overspray off the bumpers, front and rear. I have to re-tidy up the tail section and get rid of all the crud off that. So it's on the to-do list. Oh yeah, I finally got my what's that, a fuel filler cap or door. I'm keen to take this out there on the driveway and see how blindingly white it is in actual sunlight, and also to see if we can notice any of that pearl. So I might get around to doing that, and in the meantime, while it's out there, I might clean the shed up a bit because this is an absolute tornado's hit it. It's an absolute mess. So I'm going to take this out there and we'll have a look at it in some sunlight. Alright, so we're off the jack stands. I just put gearbox fluid in the gearbox. I am so not used to this car being so low on the ground. And the crazy thing is the suspension hasn't even been like lowered. So this is pretty cool. Now what I'm about to do is reverse the car out of the garage, which means it's going to be driving on its own power for the first time since I've owned it, which is pretty much since the first time it was stripped completely, and this new engine's gone into it, and hopefully things like the gearbox, the adapter plate, the clutch, the diff, the driveline, all of this stuff I hope I've put together correctly so it doesn't break on me. top up things like radiator fluid, etc. Well, damn. Well, that was a success. I don't know if you can see it or not, but damn, that purple, it's like a green, purple and copper color on the GT stripes. I hope this video is picking the color up. I really do. Those stripes are nuts. They're so much better than what I thought, because I have not seen this in sunlight. Now, I will say one thing. You'll need glasses when you look at it. And I can see some of that pearl glistening, which is really, really cool. You probably can't pick it up in the video, but it is shining. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so paint job aside, it went into reverse, no problem. A little bit of a gear crunch, which I was maybe it's just been sitting around for a long time, or maybe my foot wasn't on the clutch properly, but regardless, it went into gear alright, reversed out. I also put it in gear 1 just to go up the driveway a little bit. And it did that fine. The engine sounds smooth, there's no rattles or knocks. But this thing looks absolutely sick in the light. And although it hasn't been lowered, I don't think it needs to be. I think that is ideal. It looks fat. It looks real fat. My biggest concern is trying to find tyres that do what these tyres do, which is make that width real wide, make the wall real high. I know they're really hard to get. I know that I can get the Yokohama radials, they're very expensive, but they don't do an option for the front. They don't do a thinner version, so it's a bit of a bummer. So maybe the Samimoto or something like that. I'll have to search some tyres. But regardless, that's looking sick. So while that's sitting there baking in the sun, just looking extra awesome in the driveway, I am going to clean the shed. And now with a semi-clean garage, definitely not super clean, but just don't look at that bit. I'm going to drive it back up in and store it for however long I need. I'm pretty happy that I sprayed this car white, although it's a little bit blinding. Outside, I've already got a bit of bird crap on it. Outside, it's about 35 degrees today. That's cool as a cucumber. That's hot. So the majority of this car will stay really cool being white. I don't think I'm going to have too many paint issues. The black over the years might bubble up a little bit just because it is black and that is hot to touch. Regardless, in here is cool. Oh, let's drive this sucker back into the shed. So it was at precisely this exact moment that I decided to reverse it out onto the road. I just couldn't help myself. I had to drive it around the block once, although it's got no seats in it. I'm sitting on a blanket. I just had to do it once to make sure the brakes are working the way they should. I wanted to hear that boost sound. I just wanted to make sure the gearbox was working correctly. So away I go. Well, that was awesome. Its first kind of movement. It's smooth, sounds good. The steering's heavy, which is expected with the tyres as wide as they are on it. And on top of that, I think the steering is in a great need of wheel alignment, etc, etc. But damn, that's cool to have it moving under its own power, so I am pretty stoked. The temperature and all that kind of stuff stayed where it should be. Oil pressure was up and sitting around 80 psi, which is good. The oil pressure gauge still kind of fluctuates and dips when you're not on throttle, and it goes down to 0. So I don't think that's actually lacking oil pressure in the engine. I think it's just a gauge issue, or maybe the sender unit issue. I'm not too sure, but no biggie there. I'll get that sorted out. It moved, and hopefully I don't need to put it up on jack stands again anytime soon, although I probably will. But for now, that's going to do me. Give it a bit of a clean up again, and just check any little oil areas are not leaking. That'll do me. Happy days.